Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. For today's video, I will be talking about the 11 acrylic pours that I have done in these past few weeks during COVID-19 quarantining. I hope you all are staying safe first and foremost, staying inside and that sort of thing. I've been doing things that really interest me, like acrylic pours, and y'all seem to like that content, so here is that content for you. So in this video, I will be going over in more detail about these acrylic pours than I did in my acrylic pouring all my paints video. If you want to watch that, I'll have the link down below. So let's get started. So for all of these, I've used mostly canvases that I've painted over that were in my old craft closet from a few years ago. And this craft closet is actually right below the stairs in my basement. So I moved out of there and I just moved into the general basement area. And I had a lot of canvases in there, all of them that I really didn't use. So I decided, hey, why don't I separate these into ones I want to keep and ones that I don't. And I could use the ones that I don't want to keep into acrylic pours so that they can be something that I want to keep. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the general stuff that I do during these acrylic pours. So mainly I'm going to reach down here and grab it. So for all of these acrylic pours, I use a base of clear Elmer's glue, and this is just a bunch of clear Elmer's glue and a milk container from Publix from a few years ago when I was really into slime. So I use clear Elmer's glue, and I usually put it into like a cup like this. As you can see, it's got glue around it because this was my glue cup, but it got some sort of weird coloring in it, so I had to change cups. And for all of these recipes, I do a cup somewhat like these two. So this cup is like a Publix Dixie cup, and then this is just a general Dixie cup. So I use the same amount of glue to paint, which is 2 teaspoons, I have a teaspoon right here, to 1 teaspoon of water that I usually put in a OI yogurt jar. And then I put some water into this tub. As you can see, I use this tub so much, but I put water into this tub so that way in between the colors I can put the teaspoon into the water, wash it out, and keep going from there. And sometimes when I'm not entering, when I put the paint into the teaspoon, I have to use something to hold the teaspoon, so I use like a paint filter or sometimes like a drink lid, like right here, like one of these drink lids. Okay, so the first pour that I did during quarantine is this one right here. This is the Earth acrylic pour that I made. This was a canvas that I had originally put a quote from my favorite song of all time, Let It Go from Frozen. And I painted that quote on a blue background. And I put it on this canvas. So for this one, I got these somewhat filters to pour the mixture into to create a cool design. So for this one, I used this little cloudy blue filter. As you can see, it's still got a little bit of paint in it. And for all of these first three, I've used the red canvas actually from my acrylic pouring all my paints video. And I use that as a guide to figure out how much to make of the mixture, because in that mixture I used 2 teaspoons of paint and glue to 1/2 teaspoon of water. And I knew that that was not going to be enough for this canvas right here, because this canvas is 18 by 14 inches long, which is substantially bigger than that. So for this pour, and I think like 5 or 6 of them, the majority of these, I actually used pictures on the internet to be inspired. But actually, after I acrylic poured all my paints, I decided, I was like, oh, it would be a good idea to do a big pour inspired by the colors of the earth. And I used this picture right here to find these colors. So the colors that I used for the earth one, I did 4 teaspoons of the paint and glue to just a regular teaspoon of that, of the water, not the water. And I made 2 separate mixtures in a cup that's similar to this, of a mixture that looks like water and a mixture that looks like land and that sort of thing. So the paints that I used are this Bahama blue, this deep navy, and this new shamrock. And that was one mixture, and then the other mixture I had a white, a king's gold, and a territorial beige color. And ultimately, that created this beauty right here. I'm actually a really big fan of how this turned out. I really love all the ripples and the waves. As you can see here, there's like splashes of the navy, and that's because around this sort of area right here, I actually had a lot of this yellow brownish mixture, and I kind of wanted to mix that up, so I had a little bit of this navy mixture left, and I decided to take a little popsicle stick. I use popsicle sticks to mix the mixtures, and I swirled it around. So there's the earth pour, and after I poured the ones that I used the filters for, I had to put the filter on a paper plate. So this is the one that I did for the unicorn one that I'm going to talk about later in this video. I had to sit them on here so that the mixture wouldn't go on like a table or something like that. So moving on to this one right here. I did this one inspired by an actual galaxy in the book Imagining Space and Time, Hubble, by David Dvorkin and Robert W. Smith. It's a book that my dad has that has a bunch of pictures of like galaxies and that sort of thing. And if you know me, you know I love space and all that stuff. And this one is inspired by the active galaxy M82. And I will put the picture right here. So just like the canvas that I used for the earth pour, this is a 8 by 14 inch canvas that I did, I believe it was a Winnie the Pooh quote on, because if you know anything about me, you know that Winnie the Pooh has been my all-time favorite Disney character since I was very, very little. I've always been a fan of Winnie the Pooh. And for this one, I believe I used, right, there you are, this filter right here. It could be completely wrong. Pretty sure I did. But I did the same thing that I did with the earth one. I made 2 different mixtures of the paints. So the paints that I used are, and for a lot of these, I should have mentioned this in the beginning, I used a lot of white and black, and you'll see a lot of paints that I've said before, but I'm just going into detail about these pours. So for this one, I had to see my notes. I realized I had a note in a completely wrong position. So this is true, I did use that. I had a note from, in the beginning, I'm using like little sticky notes as a note. So for this, I used black and white, Diva pink, which is one of my favorite paint colors, electric blue, purple velvet, and I actually made my own. Actually, no, I didn't make my own. I used this ripe apricot paint with another one because there wasn't enough in this one. So yeah, there is the completed galaxy one. I really like this area right here with the pops of color. I kind of thought it was going to be a little bit brighter than this, but it did have black. And with a lot of these acrylic pours, I added white, but you can't see it. So that is very unfortunate. Alright, so next up we have the biggest acrylic pour that I've done of all time. If you notice little jingling, that Zachy just came into the room. This is one that I saw, I didn't do the exact thing, but I saw something like this on Michaels.com, or Michaels' website, called the Bright Color Paint Pouring Canvas project, which I will put a picture right here. And I actually added in this one, on the one on Michaels, it just had blue, yellow, pink, and green. And I kind of wanted to make it kind of a rainbow spectacle, so I added in orange and purple for that. For this one, I believe, oh wait, no, I know, I used this one. It has little hearts in it, and it created a cool design for it. And I actually had to triple the original recipe because this canvas is a 20 by 16 inch canvas. And I had a 10 by, I believe it was 8. So it's so much bigger than the ones that I originally did a few months ago. So I didn't use this, I used this. So I tripled the recipe, so I used 6 teaspoons, which is 2 tablespoons of paint and glue, and then I did 3 of the half, which I believe is 1.5 teaspoons, maybe. I could be wrong, math. But for this, I ended up mixing a bunch of colors to match the colors that were on the one on Michaels' website, because one was like a salmon color and I don't have salmon, so I mixed a bunch of bright colors. So for the blue, I used this, I believe it's pronounced Viridian, and it's a acrylic paint in the brand Master's Touch. I had a lot of this. This is probably the biggest bottle of acrylic paint I have right now. So there's that. And then for yellow, I used daffodil yellow and dandelion yellow. For pink, I used pink parfait and candy pink. For green, I used lime tree and the glow in the dark folk art paint. For orange, I had to use 3 colors because I am very low on orange paint, so I used apricot, ripe apricot, and then the glow in the dark orange. And then for purple, I used purple, heather, and then I did a little droplet of the neon purple to add some brightness to it. And I actually, for this, I knew that the mixture was not going to fit in the Dixie cups, so I had to use the Oi jars to mix up the mixture. But I really love how this one turned out. I really love all the colors. It reminds me a lot of tie-dye. I added splashes of blue around it because you couldn't see a lot of blue. You could see a lot of purple, which I think is very surprising. So there is the bright color acrylic pour. Alright, so next up, I like to call this one the Dark Horse. And why, you may ask? Because this one was inspired by the stacked canvas paint pouring art project on Michaels.com, and I will put that picture right here. Now the reason why I call this one the Dark Horse is if you see that picture, and you see this, you're like, you used somewhat the same colors in that one. I did. And I actually, for the ones on Michael's website that I wanted to recreate, I used an app called Color Name to kind of match up the colors. And obviously, as you can see, it's a lot. And for this one, I went back to the recipe that I used for the Galaxy and Earth one. 4 teaspoons of paint and glue to 2.5 teaspoons of water for that. And I went back to pouring them in the Dixie cups. So let's start off with the ones that you can see in this one. You can clearly see the deep navy. Like I said, I use a lot of colors multiple times. This one's almost out. That's how much I used it in these. Black and white. You can't see the white, I just realized that. And then the purple velvet. And then the ones that are really shocking, and I was able to identify one of these colors by like dry specks in it. That's why I know that there's white, because I have a big giant jug of white paint. And in there's some paint chips. And some of the paint chips went on this canvas. So I know that I used to paint with paint chips, and the only one that I have with paint chips is white. So I know I used white. And then the bright colors that you clearly do not see are Diva Pink, King's Gold, and Bahama Blue. But maybe y'all can see it, but I don't see anything, but there are some speckles of pink chips around this area right here. Let me see if you can, yep, like right around here. Those are like pink speckles, which indicate some sort of speck of paint that was colored pink. You can clearly see some blue and that sort of thing. But yeah, there is the dark horse one. And I just now realized, I believe I used this filter. I used this filter a lot because it gives a really cool design. So moving on, I did these two the same day, same mixture, and it is inspired by the spring pastel paint pouring art on Michael's website, which I will put this picture right here. And as you can see, when I was planning out what I was going to do in this video last night, when I saw the title, I was like, pastel? You can clearly see in these two that there is one pastel, and that is orange. But that's it. So for this one, I actually had a lot of a mixture. I believe I used maybe 4 or 2 teaspoons of the glue and paint and 1 or 2 half teaspoons of the water. But for this, I actually made my own orange because the orange in the picture was very weird. I've never seen an orange like that. I've never had an orange like that, so I had to make my own orange. So for this one, I used 2 very common paints that I've said numerous times in this video so far. White and deep navy. And then I used the glow-in-the-dark green with something else probably, because in the picture there's like a neon green. It's not pastel, it's neon. It's clearly neon green. And then I used pink eraser and then pure gold. And I really like how this one turned out. I'm going to put a picture right here. That was what the canvas looked like when I posted a video of what I did on Instagram. And clearly you can see a large amount of the deep navy. And in that, you could barely see it. But usually what happens with acrylic pours is that some paint comes up to the surface, and I think that's what happened with the deep navy. I really like how this one turned out. I love the ripples and the waves and that sort of thing. I believe I used a cup, and I poured just across, zigzag maybe, and I actually ended up using this spatula right here to empty it out on this canvas right here. I like this canvas. I like the subtle waves and then the pops of color around it. But yeah, pastel, it's not pastel, I'll tell you that much. So I realized after putting those two canvases down that I did use 2 teaspoons and 1/2 teaspoon of water. And the 2 teaspoons were of the paint and glue, obviously, for that mixture, since I did have to scoop out a lot of the mixture that was still left in the cup. So there's that. The next one is another twofer. So these two really nice neons. I love the design of these two, and I'll talk about the design aspect in a minute. But these weren't inspired by anything. These were actually, I'm a big fan of baking, like y'all know. And I was inspired by drip cakes for this one. So for this I used all of my neon colors. We have neon pink, neon orange, and I'm pretty sure I used some sort of other bright orange for that. Neon blue, neon yellow, and then I don't have a neon green, so I use this tempera paint right here. And then I'm pretty certain, like the orange, I used the neon purple with something else as well. But the reason why I wanted to leave the technique of how I did these till after I talked about paints was because for this, like I said, I was inspired by drip cakes on the internet for this. So what I did was I took a Ziploc snack bag. These are very small bags. And this is one that I did for the silver one, which I'm going to talk about later in the video. And I poured each individual mixture into one of these bags, and I put it in a oil jar. And then when it came time to do the design, I started with pink, I believe. I had like mixture obviously right here, cut the tip, and I swirled it around both two canvases. I had both of the canvases like this, almost sticking together, not really, with a little bit of space in between. And then once I had all of the mixture on the canvases, that's when I took one and I tilted it, trying to get the design, and then this is how they turned out. So I will start with this one. I'm a really big fan of how these turned out. I love the design. I love the pops of paint that you see. The reason why I want to touch on these, see a little bit of canvas right there, and that's because, like I said, I used 2 canvases for this, so there was a little bit of runoff, so I had to use some of the mixture that I had left to cover those edges. But I really love the swirl technique. It created these really cool wave curve type things. And here's the second one. I'm a really big fan of how both of these turned out. And just to make note, for all of these ones that I have left as well, I used the 2 teaspoons of paint and water, or not paint and water, paint and glue, and then the 1/2 teaspoon of water for these mixtures. But next up we have the gold one. I personally really like how this turned out, and as you can see, there's a lot of glitter in this. I will get to that in a minute. So for this one, I was thinking about when I acrylic poured all of my paints, and I was like, I never did a gold or a silver one, and I have a lot of like metallic-y paints. So I was like, oh, what if we do like a gold and silver one, but we include glitter? So that's why you see glitter in this one, because I wanted to see the effect that glitter had on this. Because the first time I did acrylic pours, my mom got a Crayola signature acrylic pour kit, and it had like a glitter paint maybe, and that sort of made it a little bit glittery. So wanted to try that out for this one. And for this one, I used the frosting technique again, put them into bags, snip the tip. So for this one, I used pure gold, bright gold, king's gold, golden sunset, and then I used this mustard paint 2 times. I used this as an individual color, and then when I add this gold glitter right here, I wanted to add a little bit of something to the back. And I wasn't originally planning on using this. I was planning on using a color called antique gold. But when I opened the antique gold, I was like, that's not a gold, that's a brown. So I apparently put some sort of cream colored paint in there. So I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? So I realized I had this mustard. So I ended up using this mustard for this one. And I'm a really big fan of how this turned out. As you can see, it's very glittery. But I love not only how the glitter kind of created like glittery waves, but you can still see the pops of gold around the canvas. But I personally really love this. So there is the gold one. Moving on to the silver one. For this, I used the frosting technique as well. As you can see, this has like a silvery paint in it, so I used that technique as well for this. And as you can see, I had silver glitter in this, just like I did with the gold, but with gold glitter. And I had very little of the silver glitter, so I actually had to break this little hard plastic container that the glitter was in, and I put the actual water, the 1/2 teaspoon of water in here, swished it around, poured it out. Some of the water didn't come out, so I broke the little thing to get the glitter out. So for this, I used white and black, and I didn't use these individually. I actually used equal amounts of white and black, 1 teaspoon of white to 1 teaspoon of black to create a gray color because I don't have a gray paint. And then for the rest, I used all metallics plus the glitter. So I used this pearl white, this gunmetal gray that I actually used in my metallic acrylic pour for the acrylic pouring all my paints. And then I used this platinum. And then to add a little depth to it, I added the charcoal black. Because sometimes charcoal can have silvery undertones, I thought. But I'm actually super happy with this. It reminds me a lot of marble and rocks. But what's really cool, and what you can't see on camera, is it's very lustrous. It's so shiny. I love all the ripples. You can see the ripples because of the black. And I did this again with doing the frosting technique, I like to call it. And like the gold, I actually just used one canvas, unlike the one that I did neon with the frosting technique. But I'm a really big fan of how this turned out. Love the ripples and that sort of thing. Alright, and before I move on to the most recent one that I actually did yesterday, I want to note that the silver one was the last one that I did the frosting technique for. I'm definitely going to do it again. It's just I ran out of the Ziploc bags. And I didn't want to use regular quart Ziploc bags because I didn't want to be depleted of Ziploc bags in my house. So for the final one, I have this unicorn inspired one that I actually remembered my birthday in 2018. My mom and my sister actually made me a unicorn birthday cake that I'll actually put a picture right here. And it was inspired by a cake that one of my favorite YouTubers, Rosanna Pansino, made on her YouTube channel of a really cool looking unicorn cake, which is the inspiration for this one actually. So I will put a picture of that right here. And unicorns are usually kind of pastel inspired. So this one's pastel. The one where I had the one that was the first twofer, I like to call it, that was not pastel. This is pastel. So for this, I used, like a lot of these, white. I used pure gold, a light blue, a princess pink, a blue bonnet, and a lilac mist. And I used these two blues because in Rosanna Pansino's cake, she had two blues. So these two blues were the most similar to the blue colored frostings that she used for the main of her cake. And then I obviously did the white because of unicorn, obviously. And then she had a gold horn with ears that were on the inside were gold. So this one's still kind of drying, as you can see. But I'm a really big fan of this. I love all the bubbles. And then we got some waves over here. Now, what I think is very interesting about this one in particular is with a lot of the canvases before this one, I added white, but you can't see it. This one, you can clearly see the white. We got white around this area right here. And I didn't add any extra white. I used the same amount, 2 teaspoons of paint and glue, and 1/2 teaspoon of water for this one as well. But I didn't change it. But I actually did use a filter. I used this filter right here that kind of reminds me of a flower. But I'm a really big fan of how this turned out, that I might do one inspired by some more of my favorite animals. So that is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Actually, you know what, before I go, I'm going to show you all this. So this is a lot of the paint chips that I have left of the pours. And it's gotten to the point where I actually have off to the side, I'm not going to show you because it's a lot, but I have so much more paint chips just lying around that I actually used a bigger hole punch, not a hole punch like this. I used a bigger hole punch to punch holes into that to give me bigger dots. So there's some paint chips that I used. But like I said, thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you guys are staying safe, staying indoors, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Bye, guys. Alright, guys, so I'm back very shortly after I ended the video, and I realized I never told y'all in the beginning of the video when I was explaining my process and that sort of thing. I never told y'all how I actually let these canvases dry. So here I have the cups. As you can see, they're absolutely covered in a lot of the pouring mixture. And I didn't show these because I completely forgot. My bad. I wasn't going to show my tablecloth because my tablecloth is horrendous. But I actually have a little small black table. I don't know the dimensions of that. But I used 4 cups for the bigger ones, like the bright one, the dark horse, the earth, and the galaxy one. And then for the regular ones that were 10 by 8, sometimes I used 4 if they had 2 of them. So like the one that Michael's called pastel, and then the one that I did the neon drip for. But then for the rest, I just used 2. So that's now all it for the video.